I'm here with the amazing Tania Richard, who happens to be a very dear friend of mine, who also, if you haven't checked it out already, listen to her podcast, which is Tania's Take, Race, Culture, and the Culture of Race. I got it.
Woohoo!
And check it out. It's really quite timely and important and so wise.
Well, thank
So we're
you.
dressed up because we're going to be talking about, what are we talking about, Tania?
We are talking about And Just Like That and Sex in the City, and a particular sort of aspect of it for this version, and then very possibly continuing the conversation on my podcast where we can just like talk about the series in general.
Yes. I've been checking it out to see how does it really represent what it's like to lose a best friend, because Kim Cattrall slash Samantha in that show was a best friend.
Whether or not it changed the friendship, which I think it has, because the truth is, Charlotte, Miranda, and Carrie as a trio are very judgmental of each other and not terribly kind, right?
Ooh, I'm loving that you're saying this. Okay, all right.
I heard Michael Patrick King, who is the writer, not a fan, but anyways, he is all like, we had to do this. We had to destroy Carrie's life. We had to kill Big in order to tell this new chapter. Otherwise, what would it have been about? But you make a case for how it really could have been about something much richer and deeper if it had been about the loss of Samantha entirely.
I appreciated that Samantha showed up with the flowers after Big died. I thought that was really great. But here's what I don't. The biggest thing is, in my podcast is really about taking responsibility. And I feel like the blame has completely been put on Samantha. And she's like, and that she's a money grubber. And I'm like, no. And I feel, and I'm just gonna say what I wonder. I wonder if it's a bit convenient for the writers and everyone to offload on the person or the actor and the character who's not in the room.
I think there's a lot to what you're saying around the Samantha, and I think there's so many levels to it. There's a level to it on the level of the writing, which number one is self-serving and inconsistent, right? Because Samantha, the character that we all know and love, would never end 3 friendships over money, right? She would never do that. And so there's a betrayal there. Do a dig at Kim Cattrall, the actress who took care of herself, had boundaries, and decided not to do
God.
the
Yes.
I mean, it's
Yes.
literally when Sarah Jessica Parker's like, I didn't know I was an ATM. She's talking about Kim Cattrall.
I know. I know. I know.
So that's trashy and not okay. But then the other thing is so I've been obsessed. It's just like, someday I'll figure this out. But I have been strangely obsessed for the past few weeks with them, just like that. Also watching old Sex in the Cities. It's sort of like really has my attention. And so I've also listened to, it's really quite enjoyable listening to all the different perspectives after the episodes air. And somewhere I saw something about how somebody has a theory. This one might have been on TikTok. Samantha, in relation to the other 3 women, but she actually had another group of friends that she had much deeper and richer relationships with. And so this idea that friendships sometimes too just fade. She was good, maybe 5 years older than the 3 of them. Like she could have outgrown them. And it didn't have to be this complicated way for Michael Patrick King and Sarah Jessica Parker to kind of like get theirs and be able to like dig at Samantha or Kim Cattrall and have her not be able to defend herself.
Love what you're saying. And I'm just going to highlight something that you said that I say yes, that the writers betrayed us.
Yes.
And as best friends go or close friends go, when they leave our life, we can't just vilify them and write it off in a 1-sentence thing. We just can't.
Well, I think people do, but
yes,
I think
they do.
to be realized and, it's not, which clearly, which is why I love what you're doing with the podcast, because everybody does have a certain amount of responsibility. And as a writer myself, I've done sort of like, how would I have written Samantha off? what are the options, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
certainly one of the options would be that idea of them outgrowing each other, that idea of Carrie's, behavior fraying the relationship, which would not be a shock because Carrie's been behaving abhorrently. And when you go back and watch Sex in the City, you realize Carrie's behavior is abhorrent. So it would be no surprise that she would alienate. So after all these years, finally alienate. You have those friends
Yes.
who eat you alive. As you watch Sex in the City, you realize that she behaves like a child. And from season about 4.5 to 6,
What's happening in 4.5 to
so
6?
that's around the time Aiden hits all the way through to the end of the series.
Yes.
She acts like a drunken fairy. And what I mean like that, she's like a pixie fairy girl gone wrong, right?
Yes.
Her mannerisms, the way she's talking, the way she's presenting herself. And so I made a joke on TikTok that I actually think that, I think she's in trauma. I think that she had a trauma in her childhood. So if you ever see some people who sort of dress out of context, say, I remember I had a French teacher in the 80s, 90s who dressed like she was in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And it was and wore 70s type shoes and whatever. And I remember thinking or learning around that time that sometimes people stop at the point in their life where they've experienced a trauma, and it can manifest in their behavior. It can manifest in how they dress. And so of course I was saying all of this jokingly on TikTok, but I'm like, there's something there because her behavior is wild. If you go back and watch Sex in the City.
So where can people follow you on TikTok?
TRICHARD 51. When Charlotte's like, I think Miranda has a drinking problem, she's like, you're noticing too many things. And then she does use it against her when it inconvenienced her because of what happens with Shay in the kitchen, right? So and she's utterly helpless without the support of her friends. She can't pack an apartment. She can't handle with grief. Even back to the movie when, Samantha had to freaking feed her. I mean, I could go on and on. A new word. It's not careless. It's careless. She is just careless. Who does that?
Yeah.
And it's
but people do. And if your friend does, maybe this is a friend you should no longer be friends with. Yes.
It's a good 2 or 3 times this episode alone where she trumps whatever a friend is going through by saying Big died.
I think it's also selling people, women,
femme presenting,
thank you, that they're saying this behavior is okay.
Right.
And that is a freaking problem. I'm going to curse. That's a fucking problem. That's a fucking problem. And
what do you mean exactly? What's okay?
That a friend can disregard your needs, that it's okay, and that it's situational based. If someone's husband dies, they have every right to take up the space with you. And
God, yes.
And I have to say, I just talked to a friend the other week who's going through a horrible time and asked me nothing. And I thought, I don't give a shit that you're going through a hard time. Why are you not going to ask how I am? And that friendship wasn't a close friendship, but I'm not reaching out to that person anymore. It's just done.
I think that's a strength of our relationship, is that no matter what one of us is going through, we always have our periphery open and want to know if the other person is well too.
Yes.
And that is, I love what you said. It's just yes, there's room for everybody's focus to be on one person for a season, maybe. But there has been a great passage of time here, which is not to say that there seems to be some urgency around Carrie's grief, but the idea is what she's doing is really toxic at this point, and yes, it's a TV show, but you're so right, because for so long, these women were aspirational. Now, when you look back at Sex and the City, you could make a huge case for ways in which I think they contributed to a drop in how women valued themselves, women's relationship to material things. Um, I could go on forever on that, but there was something aspirational about them. And as you said, there certainly was something aspirational, it felt like, about the friendships.
Mm-hmm.
And now, cut to 2022, I don't find anything aspirational about these women. I mean, this last episode finally felt familiar, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like, and well, you know, I just feel like there's such a sense of loss in terms of what they meant and what they mean now, which is why I've been mildly obsessed.
Mm-hmm. Well, but you know what's interesting, Tanya? I mean, the last big friendship I let go, I spent a year obsessing about them.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. These were your friends. You were connected to the show, and now it's, I wonder if the obsession is the processing of bye bye.
No, it totally is, and it's funny because as I have been gathering, like just watching various um, content creators talking about this, I was watching one woman in particular, and she was going off, and she was all animated. I'm like, oh my gosh, Sex and the City fans are not okay. You know what I mean? Like, we're not okay.
Right, right,
and in that way, it's like, it's the argument for what these types of shows mean in the zeitgeist. It is entertainment, but it's a reflection and it's a moment. I had mentioned to you that one of the things that was making me sad about it was remembering so distinctly the people I would talk to about the show when it was Sex and the City, especially towards the end. I mean, I just remember what felt like the general zeitgeist was just sort of wrapped up in how this was going to conclude, right? And I would talk to about a couple of my friends who I am no longer friends with. And at first, I didn't have anybody who was watching it that I knew that I could talk to about it. And I was feeling this sense of loss.
Do I want to be friends with this series? And I don't know.
Oh my goodness. Well, here's what I've gotten out of watching this.
Love it.
I think I've gotten to grapple with some grief. And it's not literally the grief of the show, come on, but it's my own grief and how, what I want to do with that. I think it's given me something to feel strongly about that is low stakes, right? Because we are in such a tough period, and people will ask, like, I was in a period, hate watching it for sure. But now I'm just observing it, and I'm creating these TikTok videos on it, which is always fun for me. And I can't even believe it, but I think I'm going to miss it when it's over.
No, I understand. So it's such as a friend. I mean, because such as a friend, and that's and even though that they have all these new friends coming in, I'm sad that the women are not like, I miss Samantha, because you cannot replace, like, even if someone is a pain in the ass, there's still the reason why I was friends with them was they did bring something to the room. They brought something into our.
Well, yeah, and the truth is I miss all of them, and I think that that's what has been hard.
Thank you. It's a beautiful, maybe not easily wrapped up ending, but I love it. I like the mess. Let's be in the mess. I think it's time to accept the mess. Thank you so much.